An entire civilization thrived and then vanished without a trace. It left behind magnificent cities, a script no one can read, and a profound mystery where weapons should have been. This is the story of the Indus Valley civilization, a locked library of history whose key has been lost for over 4,000 years. Understanding this ancient society does more than fill a gap in a textbook. It forces us to rethink everything we assume about how complex societies organize power and communicate. By the end of this journey, you will see a forgotten world that challenges our deepest ideas about what makes an empire work. We will walk the gridded streets of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, stare at symbols that guard their secrets, and confront the haunting question of how a vast society could flourish with so little evidence of war. What does it mean for a civilization to be remembered, yet remain completely silent? The Indus River winds through a landscape of immense possibility. Around 2,500 years before the Common Era, its floodplains were a canvas of rich soil and reliable water, a perfect foundation for something extraordinary to take root. This was the cradle of the Indus Valley civilization, a society whose influence stretched across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, covering what is now Pakistan and northwest India. While pharaohs built pyramids along the Nile and city-states rose between the Tigris and Euphrates, an equally sophisticated culture was flourishing here, in parallel, yet utterly distinct. Its rediscovery began not with grand monuments, but with humble bricks. In the 1800s, British engineers laying railway tracks in Punjab stumbled upon well-fired bricks of an ancient type, plundering them for ballast. It took decades for archaeologists to recognize these bricks as fragments of a lost world, leading to the systematic excavations of Harappa in the 1920s and Mohenjo-daro soon after. What they uncovered was staggering, not for towering temples or royal tombs, but for a different kind of grandeur, one of breathtaking order and meticulous design. This forces us to ask a fundamental question: what truly defines a civilization? Is it the flash of conquest and the cult of personality, or can it be found in the quiet genius of urban planning, in wide streets and advanced plumbing? The Indus Valley presents a profound challenge to our traditional models, offering a blueprint for a society that chose a different path. To understand its silence, we must first walk its orderly streets. The ruins did not rise in a chaotic jumble but lay in a perfect geometric grid. For the archaeologists who first uncovered Mohenjo-daro, the site was disorienting in its modernity, a city plan that would not look out of place in a contemporary urban design. Straight, wide main streets ran north-south and east-west, intersecting to create large city blocks with narrower lanes branching off to individual homes. This was not an organic growth but a masterwork of deliberate, premeditated planning, executed on a scale unmatched in the ancient world. At the heart of this urban marvel stood the Great Bath, a large, waterproofed pool constructed with precise brickwork and bitumen sealant, likely used for ritual purification. Nearby, a massive structure with rows of ventilated foundations is thought to have been a granary, a storehouse for the city's agricultural wealth that speaks to sophisticated economic management. But perhaps the most telling feature was hidden beneath the streets, a city-wide network of covered drains and chutes that carried waste away from homes and into the main sewers. This commitment to public hygiene is staggering for its time, revealing a collective priority for communal well-being that required immense coordination. As archaeologist John Marshall noted, such standardized civic architecture implies a society with a powerful, shared vision, one capable of organizing labor and resources across vast distances. This vision is crystallized in a simple yet profound detail: the uniform size of the bricks. From Mohenjo-daro to distant Harappa and beyond, the baked bricks conform to a consistent ratio, a standardized module used across the entire civilization. This suggests not the heavy hand of a central dictator, but perhaps a deeply ingrained shared knowledge, a common technical language that allowed builders hundreds of miles apart to work from the same invisible blueprint. What kind of social contract, what shared values, could produce such harmony in brick and mortar, yet leave no monuments to kings or conquests? The silent stones of Mohenjo-daro tell us much about how these people lived, but to hear their voices, we must look at what they wrote. Hundreds of miles to the north, another city told the same story in the same silent language. Harappa, the site that gave its name to the entire civilization, revealed itself not as a copy but as a sister city, sharing a profound cultural DNA with distant Mohenjo-daro. When excavators brushed the dust from its ruins, they found artifacts that felt eerily familiar. The same square soapstone seals etched with animal motifs and unknown symbols, the same distinctive black-on-red pottery, the same tiny terracotta carts and figurines. These were not isolated discoveries, they were matching pieces of a vast, interconnected puzzle. Harappa's foundations may be even older, suggesting the ideas that shaped this civilization crystallized here before spreading, yet its ultimate form spoke of a shared vision. The city was dominated by a massive mud brick citadel mound, raised high above the plain and surrounded by extensive working platforms where archaeologists believe activities like grain processing or craftwork took place on an industrial scale. Later experts like Mortimer Wheeler initially interpreted these mounds and walls through a military lens, seeing fortifications and evidence of a final, violent end. But modern scholarship often views them differently, not as bastions of war but as elevated foundations for civic or ceremonial structures protected from floods, symbols of communal effort rather than military fear. The true testament to unity, however, lies in the small, everyday objects. Across the entire Indus realm, from the coast to the foothills, a system of standardized weights has been found. These were carefully shaped cubes of chert, following a precise binary and decimal progression. A merchant in Harappa could weigh out a quantity of grain using a 1-unit weight, and a trader in a distant coastal town like Lothal would use an identical weight to measure out precious beads, all without dispute. This points to an astonishing level of economic integration, a common commercial language that enabled trade to flow smoothly across hundreds of miles. We see this network in action with objects like finely crafted chert blades, whose raw material was sourced from quarries far outside the Indus Valley itself. These blades were then distributed throughout the civilization, a physical proof of supply chains and economic interdependence that bound the cities and towns together. This was a culture connected by trade, by measurement, by a shared aesthetic in its crafts. But if their economic language was one of weights and measures, their personal language, their thoughts and their names were captured in a form that remains just out of reach. They left their mark on small, intimate objects, pressing symbols into clay that have stubbornly guarded their meaning for millennia. This small soapstone seal, no larger than a postage stamp, would have been a merchant's most important possession. Carved with exquisite care, it depicts a powerful, hump-backed bull, its muscles rendered in fine detail, standing above a line of elegant, unknown symbols. Pressed into a clay tag sealing a shipment of grain or a lump of wet clay on a storage jar, it served as both signature and safeguard, a mark of ownership and authenticity in a bustling Bronze Age economy. Yet for us, 4,000 years later, it is something far more profound. It is a locked diary. The symbols beneath that bull are part of the Indus script, one of the world's last major undeciphered writing systems, a silent testimony that has resisted all attempts to give it voice. Unlike the triumphant decoding of Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, the script of the Indus Valley remains a tantalizing, unbroken cipher. Experts like Asko Parpola have dedicated entire careers to the puzzle, mapping over 400 distinct signs found on seals, miniature tablets, and pottery. The challenge is immense. The inscriptions are heartbreakingly short, most containing only 4 or 5 signs, with the longest discovered text having just 26. We have no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscription that says the same thing in a known language and in Indus script. We do not even know for certain what language family the Harappans spoke. Was it related to ancient Dravidian tongues, to early forms of Sanskrit, or something else entirely lost to time? Even basic facts are debated, though most scholars agree the writing typically ran from right to left, as impressions on clay show the signs crowding leftward. The script itself is a mix. Some signs are clearly pictorial, showing a fish, a jar, or a human figure, while others are starkly abstract, geometric shapes whose meaning is utterly opaque. This elegant, compact system was clearly functional and widespread, yet its messages are forever muted. This leads us to a pivotal question. If we cannot read their words, can we at least guess what those words were for? Was this a script of kings and gods, or was it, like the standardized weights and brick sizes, a tool of commerce and civic life? The purpose of these enigmatic symbols may hold the key to the civilization's most baffling trait, its apparent peace. Think of the last time you received a package, a box sealed with clear tape and a printed label bearing your name and address. That simple label is part of a vast, silent language of logistics, a system of marks that tells handlers where something is from, where it is going, and who it belongs to. For the people of the Indus Valley, their seals and inscriptions may have served a remarkably similar, practical purpose. The prevailing theory among many scholars is that this mysterious script was not a vehicle for epic poetry or royal decrees, but a sophisticated tool for economic and administrative record-keeping. It was the Bronze Age equivalent of an invoice, a shipping manifest, and a trademark, all pressed into a single lump of clay. This perspective is powerfully argued by researchers like Stephen Farmer, who suggests the signs might not represent a spoken language in the way we understand it, but rather a complex system of non-linguistic symbols, a kind of proto-writing designed to manage the intricate web of trade that held the civilization together. The physical evidence strongly supports this. Thousands of seals have been discovered, not hidden in temples or palaces, but in contexts associated with commerce and storage, near city gateways, workshops, and docking areas. Imagine a merchant in Lothal, the civilization's great port, preparing a shipment of carnelian beads bound for Harappa. He would pack the beads, tie the bundle, and then press his personal seal into a soft clay tag affixed to the cord. Once hardened, that tag became a tamper-proof seal. The image, perhaps of the iconic unicorn bull, identified his merchant house, while the line of symbols below might have listed the contents, the quantity, or the destination. This system created trust across vast distances. The widespread discovery of the same unicorn motif on seals from different cities hints at something fascinating, perhaps a powerful merchant guild or a widespread clan whose trademark was recognized and trusted from the coast to the interior. In this light, the script was not meant to be read aloud as a sentence, but to be recognized visually, like a corporate logo paired with standardized product codes. It was a functional technology for a highly organized society, ensuring that cotton from one city could be traded for timber from another without confusion or conflict. Yet, if these marks were purely for business, why did people carry them on personal seals, objects of pride and identity? This practical explanation is compelling, but it leads us to wonder if the symbols held a second, more intimate layer of meaning, one that touched the spiritual life of the individual who owned them. But look closer at another seal, one that has captivated scholars for generations. Carved into its surface is a figure seated in a clear posture of meditation, legs crossed, arms resting on the knees, surrounded by animals. Many see in this image a startling prototype for the later Hindu deity Shiva, the lord of yoga and animals. Here, the line of script above the figure's head feels different. It carries a weight beyond mere inventory. This seal opens the door to a second, compelling theory, that the Indus script was not just a tool of commerce, but a vessel for ritual, identity, and political symbolism. Perhaps these elegant marks encoded personal names, divine titles, or short religious invocations. A seal, in this view, was more than a business stamp. It was a declaration of who you were, your family lineage, your occupational guild, or your devotion to a particular deity. The iconic animal motifs, the unicorn, the bull, the elephant, might have served as clan totems or symbols of protective powers, while the accompanying script spelled out the specific individual or title within that group. Scholars like Iravatham Mahadvan have spent decades pursuing connections to ancient Dravidian languages, suggesting the signs could represent the sounds of an early Tamil predecessor, encoding words for chieftain, star, or god. In this theory, the script becomes a hybrid system, blending the immediately recognizable symbol, the picture of the bull, with the specific linguistic sign, the name of the bull's owner. It was a badge of identity in a complex society. A person carrying such a seal was not just a trader, but a member of a specific community, perhaps a priest, an official, or a respected elder, their authority and role literally stamped into clay. This exploration of identity through writing leads us to a deeper question about the society that created it. If these seals marked status and affiliation in a highly structured civilization, how did that society manage the conflicts and competitions that status and power inevitably create? The answer, or rather the lack of one, brings us to the civilization's most defining and perplexing quiet, the profound absence of the artifacts of war. In the royal art of Mesopotamia, kings stand triumphant over bound captives, their chariots crushing foes beneath them. Yet in the entire corpus of Indus Valley art, there is not a single scene like this. No carvings of battles, no statues of warrior kings, no images of prisoners or subjugated peoples. This visual silence is echoed in the ground itself. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands upon thousands of artifacts from these cities, tools for farming, for crafting, for building. But weapons, in the clear and dedicated sense we see in other ancient cultures, are astonishingly rare. This is the civilization's most defining and debated trait, its apparent weaponless peace. Scholar Jonathan Mark Kenoyer, who has worked at Harappa for decades, notes this absence is so profound it cannot be an accident of discovery. It suggests a societal priority, a cultural choice that fundamentally shaped how they lived together. What has been found are objects that exist in a gray area, small copper knives that could skin an animal or defend a home, spearheads that might have been for hunting game rather than people. There are no arsenals, no caches of swords, no mass-produced arrowheads designed for human conflict. Even the architecture speaks to this theme. The great raised citadels in cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, once thought to be fortresses, reveal a different story upon closer inspection. Their massive brick walls lack the strategic features of military defense, like arrow slits or reinforced gates. Instead, many experts now believe these platforms served primarily as elevated foundations, protecting vital civic structures like granaries and ritual baths from the Indus River's seasonal floods. They were symbols of communal resilience against nature, not against human enemies. This presents a historical puzzle of the highest order. In a world where bronze was often synonymous with the blade, how did a society of perhaps 5 million people, spanning over 1 million square kilometers, maintain order and cohesion for centuries without leaving behind the clear tools of organized violence. The mystery forces a radical rethink of power itself. If authority was not enforced through the fear of the sword, what held this vast, intricate civilization together? The answer may lie not in what they fought over, but in what they built together and what they traded. The Great Bath was not just a pool, it was a profound social anchor. Imagine a society where the ultimate source of authority was not a palace or an armory, but a meticulously engineered, watertight basin used for ritual cleansing. This leads us to the first compelling interpretation of Indus power, the idea of a theocratic peace. In this model, the civilization was governed by a priestly elite or a mercantile oligarchy, where influence stemmed from control over ceremony, commerce, and crucial resources like grain and water. Power flowed from the perceived ability to mediate with the divine and maintain the cosmic and social order, not from the threat of violence. The Great Bath itself, with its sophisticated drainage and adjacent rooms, likely served as the stage for purification rites that reinforced this sacred hierarchy. Similarly, fire altars found at sites like Kalibangan suggest ritual practices that would have united the community under a shared spiritual framework. How does such a system maintain cohesion across 1 million square kilometers? The answer lies in a powerful combination of ideology and interdependence. The stunning cultural uniformity, from identical brick ratios to the ubiquitous unicorn seals, points to a deeply ingrained shared identity, a common way of seeing the world that was reinforced through ritual and daily practice. This ideological glue was strengthened by sheer economic necessity. A farmer in the hinterlands depended on the city's granaries for storage and trade, while the city relied on his harvests. A craftsperson making chert blades needed copper from distant sources, which merchants facilitated. This created a web of mutual reliance where cooperation was not just virtuous, it was essential for survival. Authority, then, may have been exercised through the management of this web. The widespread use of standardized weights is a perfect example. These were not merely tools for fair trade, they were instruments of central control and trust. By guaranteeing a consistent measure, a ruling authority, perhaps priestly guilds overseeing temple granaries, could ensure equitable exchange, collect taxes in kind, and prevent the social discord that fraud and famine can bring. This system suggests a form of consensual rule where power was accepted because it provided stability, predictable harvests, and safe passage for goods. It makes us wonder if internal order was maintained through belief and mutual benefit. What external threats did this peaceful, prosperous civilization truly face? Or did their greatest challenge come from a source they could not control with weights, rituals, or bricks? But what if peace was not a gentle choice, but a meticulously engineered condition? A second, more shadowed interpretation of Indus authority suggests control was exercised not through the flash of bronze swords, but through a subtler, more pervasive architecture of power. In this view, the absence of obvious weapons does not signal an absence of coercion, but rather a different, more sophisticated form of it. The breathtaking uniformity of the cities themselves becomes a potential clue. From Mohenjo-daro to Harappa, the grid-like streets and standardized house layouts could reflect more than just brilliant urban planning. They might indicate a degree of social control so thorough it dictated the very shape of daily life. The ability to enforce such a uniform blueprint across a vast territory hints at a powerful central authority capable of organizing labor and suppressing local variation. Scholars who favor this perspective ask us to look at what is missing as much as what is present. Where are the grand, unique homes of a wealthy merchant class, or the distinct neighborhoods that often emerge around different trades or ethnic groups in other ancient cities? The residential architecture, while showing some variation in size, lacks the ostentatious palaces that scream of individual rulers. This could imply a society where status was displayed in less permanent ways, or one where a ruling elite deliberately minimized visual differences to maintain a facade of equality, all while holding the real levers of power. Those levers were not held in a fist but in a granary. Control over the essential resources of life, grain, and water could have been the ultimate source of authority. The massive granaries found on the Citadel mounds were not just storehouses, they were instruments of economic and social power. In a civilization dependent on agriculture, whoever controlled the surplus harvest held the key to survival. Access to food could be granted or withheld, used to reward compliance or manage dissent. Similarly, the sophisticated public wells and bathing platforms suggest a centralized management of water, another vital resource that could be regulated. This creates a picture of covert coercion, where power flows through the distribution of necessities rather than the threat of violence. Even the possibility of a police force must be reconsidered through this lens. The absence of metal weapons does not mean the absence of enforcers. Civic guards could have maintained order using non-metallic tools, wooden clubs, staffs, or ropes, objects that would decay and vanish from the archaeological record over millennia. Their authority would have been backed by the ever-present reality of the granary and the well, making overt rebellion not just dangerous but practically futile. This perspective paints the Indus Civilization not as a utopia, but as a highly efficient, perhaps rigidly managed society where stability was purchased through a monopoly on resources and a uniformity of design. It forces us to ask, if such a system of control was so effective internally, how did it engage with the world outside its orderly, brick-lined borders? Did its walls keep threats out, or did they simply define the limits of its own unique experiment? A tiny, etched carnelian bead found its final resting place far from home, nestled in the soil of the royal cemetery at in ancient Mesopotamia. This exquisite object, with its white geometric patterns burned into the red stone, did not travel alone. Alongside it, archaeologists uncovered distinctive square Indus seals, bearing their silent script and iconic unicorn. These artifacts are not mere curiosities. They are silent witnesses, physical proof that the people of the Indus Valley were master weavers of a trade network stretching thousands of miles. Their commercial threads reached from the mines of Central Asia to the ports of the Persian Gulf and deep into the Indian subcontinent, connecting them to the great civilizations of their time. This was not a closed or isolated society, but an outward-looking mercantile powerhouse. Their primary exports tell a story of sophisticated industry, finely woven cotton textiles, perhaps the first the world had seen, precious timber like teak and cedar, and luxurious finished goods like those beautiful carnelian beads, which required immense skill to drill and etch. In return, they sought raw materials to fuel their own craftsmen, importing lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan, copper from Oman, and gold and precious stones. This commerce was the lifeblood of their cities, and it was likely managed with the same meticulous order seen in their streets. Traders probably journeyed in stages, using both land routes through the mountain passes and coastal voyages aboard sturdy wooden ships, with goods changing hands through networks of trusted intermediaries in places like Bahrain, which acted as a trading hub. It is here that the script may have found one of its most vital functions. Those seals pressed into clay tags were the perfect tool for this long-distance trade, serving as tamper-proof labels that identified the sender, the contents, and perhaps the agreed-upon measure, all without a single spoken word being shared between cultures. The success of this system is recorded by their trading partners. Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets repeatedly mention a land called Meluha, a source of exotic woods, precious stones, and strange, ivory-tusked creatures, likely elephants. Most scholars are confident Meluha was the Indus Valley region. the Mesopotamians held its goods in such high regard that they used the term meluhon to describe certain luxury items and even interpreters, suggesting a regular and formalized exchange. This evidence of prosperous, peaceful external relations makes the internal picture even more puzzling. If they were so adept at diplomacy and trade across vast distances, building relationships with powerful neighbors like Mesopotamia, why is there so little evidence that they ever felt the need to fortify themselves against each other or the outside world? Their wealth was clearly known, and yet their cities show no signs of being built under the shadow of a constant threat. This flourishing commerce suggests a society confident in its place in the world, but it also raises a deeper question about what happened when the world itself began to change. The Indus was not just a river, it was a great pulsing artery of life. Its annual floods, fed by distant Himalayan snowmelt, deposited rich, silty soil across the plains, creating the agricultural abundance that fed millions. This was the fundamental bargain of the Indus Valley civilization, a relationship of profound dependence on a force of immense power and capriciousness. To thrive here was to master water in all its forms, and the archaeological record shows a society that approached this challenge with breathtaking ingenuity. In every major city, deep, brick-lined wells provided clean drinking water, a testament to public health foresight. At the coastal city of Lothal, engineers built a massive brick-lined dockyard, complete with a spillway and lock gates to manage tidal waters and berth seafaring vessels, turning the challenges of a tidal creek into a strategic advantage. And beneath the orderly streets of Mohenjo-daro lay that complex network of drains, a subterranean testament to a society obsessed with managing the flow, both bringing the vital in and carrying the waste away. This was not merely convenience, it was a civilization-wide ethos of environmental control, a dialogue with their landscape written in brick and bitumen. Yet, the most compelling evidence of their resilience may be the very platforms upon which they built their greatest cities. Mohenjo-daro was not constructed on flat ground, but on a series of massive artificial mounds raised high above the floodplain. These were not the work of a single generation, but of centuries of layered rebuilding, each new city level rising atop the ruins of the old, like a geological record of human determination against the river's will. They were literally lifting their world to keep it dry. But what if the greatest environmental challenge was not a surplus of water, but a creeping, relentless lack of it? Modern geoarchaeology, studying ancient pollen, river sediments, and stalagmites in caves, paints a picture of a gradual but decisive climatic shift. Over the centuries of the civilization's maturity, the region appears to have grown progressively more arid. The monsoons, the lifeblood of the summer growing season, may have weakened or become less reliable. This leads us to one of the most significant geographical mysteries in Indian archaeology, the Lost River. Satellite imagery and ground surveys have revealed the ghost of a vast, ancient riverbed running parallel to the Indus, now known as the Ganga-Hakra. This system, which once carried Himalayan waters, is a prime candidate for the legendary Saraswati River described in later Vedic texts. During the Indus civilization's peak, this was likely a major, perennial river, supporting a dense concentration of settlements along its banks. But the geological evidence suggests it began to fail, transforming from a mighty river into seasonal streams, and finally into the dry, sandy channel we see today. The slow death of this river would have been a catastrophe in slow motion, stretching over generations. Farmlands dependent on its water would have withered, forcing communities to abandon their homes and migrate, placing immense pressure on the remaining core cities along the Indus itself. We can see this stress in the archaeological layers, not as a single cataclysm, but as a grinding down. At sites like Kalibangan, located on the Ganga-Hakra, we find evidence of the river changing course, followed by the settlement's eventual abandonment. The civilization story, then, becomes one of brilliant adaptation meeting an escalating environmental crisis. They built platforms against floods and wells against drought, but they were engaged in a centuries-long struggle against a changing climate they could not reverse. This slow-burning environmental stress does not provide a dramatic end, but it sets the stage for a profound unraveling, where the very systems that held the society together began to face pressures from within and without. The wide, dusty street in Mohenjo-daro was not strewn with the wreckage of war. Instead, a different kind of silence settled over the city, one of gradual absence. Where once the sounds of commerce and conversation echoed, now there were only empty doorways and courtyards slowly filling with wind-blown sand. By around 1900 years before the Common Era, the great urban centers of the Indus Valley were entering their twilight, not in a sudden, fiery collapse, but in a slow, complex fading. This was not an empire falling to a foreign sword, but a civilization quietly unraveling from within, a process as layered and difficult to decipher as its script. The decline was strikingly non-uniform. Some cities like Mohenjo-daro show clear signs of neglect and shrinking population over centuries, while others, like Harappa, saw phases of rebuilding and continued, if diminished, occupation. There was no single catastrophic event, but a confluence of pressures that finally overwhelmed the delicate systems holding this vast society together. For a long time, history books told a simpler story, one of conquest. The old Aryan invasion hypothesis painted a picture of nomadic warriors from the north sweeping down, overwhelming the peaceful cities and imposing their own culture. This dramatic narrative, once popular, has been largely set aside by modern archaeology. There is no evidence of a widespread, destructive invasion at this time, no layers of ash from sacked cities, no sudden appearance of a completely new material culture atop the ruins. The story is far more subtle and in many ways more tragic. It is a story of a civilization grappling with a changing world. The environmental stresses we discussed earlier, the weakening monsoons and the shifting rivers, reached a critical point. As the Gaga-Hakra river system failed, the densely populated settlements along its banks were simply abandoned, their populations likely dispersing or migrating toward the core Indus River, placing immense strain on remaining resources. This climatic shift would have had a domino effect. Agriculture became less reliable, reducing the surplus grain that fed the cities and fueled the trade networks. As harvests grew uncertain, the great granaries lost their purpose and their power. The intricate web of long-distance trade that defined the civilization began to fray. With less surplus to export and growing instability at home, the demand for luxury imports like lapis lazuli would have plummeted. The merchants who managed this vast network, the very people who may have used those enigmatic seals, found their world shrinking. When the complex administration of a city-wide economy is no longer needed, the tools of that administration become obsolete. This is likely the fate of the Indus script. As long-distance trade diminished and the need for large-scale, centralized record-keeping faded, the script simply fell out of use. There was no one to inscribe new seals, no clay tags to press them into. The knowledge of how to read and write those elegant symbols, likely passed down within specific guilds or families, was lost within a few generations, not through destruction but through disuse. The result was a process scholars call De-Urbanization. People did not vanish, they simply left the grand, planned cities. They moved to smaller, more manageable villages, closer to reliable water sources, reverting to simpler, more localized ways of life. The complex cultural package, the standardized bricks, the elaborate drainage, the unified system of weights and measures, slowly dissolved. It was not replaced by something new and violent, but fragmented into countless smaller traditions. The great experiment in urban living and non-coercive power had reached its end, not with a bang but with a whisper. And yet, as the last families gathered their belongings and walked away from the silent streets of Mohenjo-daro, they carried something with them, invisible but enduring. The stones were left behind, but the seeds of a legacy were carried forward. The grand experiment of the cities ended, but the people did not vanish. For centuries after Mohenjo-daro's streets fell silent, life continued in countless smaller villages and homesteads across the plains. This period, known to archaeologists as the late Harappan or post-urban phase, is not a blank page in history, but a quieter chapter where the legacy of the civilization was distilled, adapted, and carried forward. Imagine a potter, her family having left the crowded metropolis generations ago, now shaping clay by a smaller river. Her hands still remember. The vessel she creates may be simpler without the fine black paint of the classic era, but its form, the way she shapes the rim or the base, echoes a technique passed down from her urban ancestors. This is the subtle story told by broken pottery shards across the region, showing a gradual evolution rather than a sudden replacement. Subsistence practices, the knowledge of which crops to plant and when, persisted. The raised platforms for threshing grain, the basic shapes of terracotta carts, even certain decorative motifs like the pipal leaf, all hint at a cultural memory that endured long after the great administrative systems faded away. Some technologies proved too valuable to lose. The exquisite art of drilling and etching long, barrel-shaped carnelian beads, a signature Indus craft, did not die out. Evidence suggests this specialized knowledge survived in regional centers, and these beautiful objects continued to be prized and traded, eventually becoming integrated into the ornamentation of later cultures in the Indian subcontinent. This paints a picture not of a civilization erased, but of one transformed. The centralized, unifying culture dissolved, but its components, like seeds scattered by the wind, took root in new soil. Archaeologists see this not as a clean break, but as a thread of continuity, where elements of Indus life were woven into the fabric of subsequent cultural complexes in the region. The focus shifted from the grand, collective projects of the city to the resilience of local community and household. This enduring legacy, written in pottery, crafts, and agricultural knowledge, is a testament to the deep roots the civilization planted. It also frames the ultimate mystery not as a disappearance, but as a transformation so profound it challenges us to find the connections. And that challenge is what drives the modern scientific quest to finally hear the whispers this civilization left behind. Deciphering the Indus script is a puzzle that has outlasted every expert who has attempted it. Think of it as a cryptic crossword with no clues, where the grid itself is only a few symbols wide, and the answers have been lost for 4,000 years. This is not a task for a single brilliant mind in a dusty library, but a modern, multidisciplinary assault on silence, involving linguists, computer scientists, and mathematicians armed with algorithms instead of shovels. Their work transforms ancient artifacts into vast digital datasets, searching for patterns invisible to the human eye. For decades, the dominant theory among many linguists, championed by scholars like Asko Parpola, has been that the script is logosyllabic. This means some signs stand for whole words or concepts, like a picture of a fish meaning fish, while others represent the sounds of syllables, which could be combined to spell out other words like names or titles. This system would make it similar to early Sumerian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs. The great hunt, then, is to identify which signs might be which and to connect them to a spoken language. The most persistent candidate has been a language from the Dravidian family, ancestors of modern languages like Tamil and Telugu. Proponents of this theory point to the survival of Dravidian languages in pockets of southern India and to potential linguistic links, like the Dravidian word for fish, min, which they suggest might correlate with a fish-shaped sign in the script that appears frequently, possibly as a symbol for a star, based on cultural metaphors. Yet, this is far from settled. Other researchers propose connections to early forms of Indo-European, the language family that includes Sanskrit, or to a completely lost language family with no modern descendants, a linguistic dead end that would make decipherment exponentially harder. This is where computational analysis enters the fray. Scientists feed every known inscription, every sequence of signs from thousands of seals and tablets into powerful computers. The algorithms perform statistical analyses, looking for patterns in how signs cluster together, how often they repeat, and where they tend to appear in a sequence. They search for the fundamental rules of syntax, the grammatical skeleton of the language. Does a particular sign always come at the beginning, like a title or a name? Do certain pairs of signs frequently appear together, suggesting a common phrase or a grammatical ending? One promising avenue has been the study of the direction of writing. Since impressions in clay show signs crowded on the left, most agree the script was written from right to left. This allows researchers to hypothesize about word beginnings and endings. Another approach compares the structure of the Indus sign sequences with the structure of known ancient scripts, not for meaning, but for underlying mathematical patterns in how symbols combine. The results are often humbling. A highly publicized study in the early 2000s used computer modeling to suggest the script showed no linguistic patterns at all, arguing it was a non-linguistic symbol system. This provocative claim was met with fierce criticism from many linguists, who argued the models were flawed and the sample size too small. This back and forth captures the essence of the quest. It is a field defined by cautious optimism and frequent, frustrating dead ends. Every new theory is met with rigorous skepticism because the cost of a false decipherment is high. It leads everyone down a garden path for years. So why does this high-tech detective story matter so deeply? It is because decipherment is not about winning an academic game. It is about restoring voice. To crack this code would be to hear the thoughts of people who built cities without palaces, who traded across oceans without empires, and who perhaps chose a path of remarkable peace. It would transform those elegant, silent symbols on a seal from a beautiful mystery into a ledger entry, a prayer, a name, a story. It would finally let the Indus Valley civilization speak for itself. What does it mean for a civilization to be truly lost? We know their cities, their drains, their weights and measures, but without their words, they remain a magnificent silhouette, a shape without a soul. Deciphering the Indus script is not an academic trophy to be placed on a shelf. It is an act of profound recovery, of restoring a voice that has been silent for millennia. Imagine the difference between viewing a silent film of ancient Egypt and hearing the actual words from a pharaoh's decree or a merchant's letter. That is the transformative power of decipherment. When Jean-Francois Champollion cracked the code of the Rosetta Stone, Egyptian history ceased to be a collection of strange pictures and became a chorus of individual voices. We heard the boasts of kings, the prayers of priests, the legal disputes of farmers. Similarly, the decoding of Mesopotamian cuneiform revealed not just king lists, but the Epic of Gilgamesh, a literary masterpiece exploring friendship, loss, and the search for meaning, composed thousands of years ago. The Indus Valley deserves no less. To read their script would be to open a window directly into their minds. We could finally move beyond our archaeological guesses and hear their own definitions. That recurring seal with the meditating figure, does the inscription above it name a deity, a priest, or a philosophical concept? Those tiny tablets found near city gates, are they tax receipts, cargo manifests, or short prayers for safe travel? The script holds the answers to our most persistent debates. Was this a society ruled by priest kings, merchant guilds, or a form of collective governance? The words on a seal from a Citadel complex would tell us. What gods did they worship and what did they ask of them? A longer inscription on a ritual object could reveal an entire cosmology. There is even the tantalizing possibility of literature, of hymns, proverbs, or historical records that would place the Indus Valley squarely within the global family of early literary traditions, not as a silent outlier, but as a participant in the ancient human conversation about life, power, and the divine. For the modern nations of South Asia, particularly Pakistan and India, the impact would be deeply cultural. This civilization is a foundational layer of the subcontinent's history. To understand its voice would enrich the historical identity of the region, providing a direct link to its earliest urban ancestors, beyond myth and into documented reality. It would transform the Indus people from a mysterious other into recognizable individuals with names, trades, and concerns. We would no longer just study their bricks, we could meet the brickmaker. This longing to hear their voice makes us look even more intently at the objects they left behind, searching for clues in the very things they held dear. The true power of a seal lies in the image pressed into the clay. Before a single symbol of the script could be read, the central icon would have been instantly recognized, a visual signature carrying layers of meaning. The most famous of these is the so-called unicorn, a graceful, one-horned bovine that appears on the vast majority of seals discovered. This creature, likely a stylized bull shown in profile, is almost always depicted standing before a curious object, a standard or ritual offering stand. Its sheer prevalence suggests it was more than a favorite animal. It may have been a powerful clan totem, a symbol of a dominant merchant guild, or even a representation of a revered concept like strength or fertility, its image guaranteeing the authenticity of whatever it sealed. Alongside it, the humped bull, or zebu, is rendered with a palpable sense of vitality, its powerful muscles and alert posture capturing a spirit of untamed energy that might have symbolized royal or divine power. These animals were not just decorative, they were the first line of communication, a logo that conveyed trust and identity across the civilization. But the seals tell other, more enigmatic stories. One recurring motif is the pipal leaf, the distinctive heart-shaped leaf of the sacred fig tree, a symbol of enduring life and spiritual wisdom in later Indian traditions. Its presence on Indus seals hints at a deep, early reverence for this tree, possibly connecting it to concepts of eternity or cosmic order. Even more compelling are the geometric designs, like the interlocking endless knot or labyrinth patterns. These complex, symmetrical symbols, which would have created a beautiful, hypnotic impression when stamped, likely carried esoteric meaning, perhaps representing the interconnectedness of life, the cycles of nature, or protective magic woven into the very act of sealing. To understand a seal, then, we must see it as a compact gallery of belief, where every element from the chosen animal to the accompanying symbol was a deliberate part of a visual language. This language reaches its most profound expression in a single, captivating image. A figure sits cross-legged on a low throne, arms resting on the knees, in a posture of deep meditation or disciplined calm. Surrounding this serene being are animals, a tiger, an elephant, a rhinoceros, and a buffalo. Many scholars, like John Marshall, who first excavated Mohenjo-daro, saw in this seal a startling prototype for the later Hindu deity Shiva, specifically as Pashupati, the lord of animals and master of yoga. Whether this is a direct ancestor or a parallel expression of similar spiritual ideas, the seal powerfully suggests that the Indus world included concepts of ascetic power, a harmony between humanity and the natural world, and perhaps a belief in figures who could transcend ordinary existence. The iconography here speaks volumes, offering a glimpse into a possible spiritual framework that would resonate for millennia. But these beautiful objects were not merely religious amulets, they were tools of action. The act of sealing itself was a performative gesture, a physical ritual of authority. Imagine a merchant, his goods packed and bound. He takes his personal seal, perhaps carved from gleaming steatite, and presses it firmly into a damp clay tag affixed to the cord. In that moment, he is not just labeling a package, he is invoking his entire identity, his reputation, his social standing, and possibly the protective power of the symbols themselves. The hardened clay becomes a legal and spiritual contract, a tiny, portable monument to a promise. If the seal was broken upon arrival, the agreement was violated. This transforms the seal from a passive picture into an active participant in the flow of life, commerce, and trust. It was a stamp of ownership, a mark of authentication, and a silent witness to transactions that built a civilization. By studying this vivid iconography, we begin to listen with our eyes, hearing the stories these people chose to stamp into eternity, stories of power, protection, and a possible peace with the world around them. This visual language offers clues that the silent script cannot, yet it also deepens the central mystery. For if their art speaks so eloquently of spiritual and social ideas, what profound narratives are locked within the accompanying signs we still cannot read? A master jeweler today, peering through a magnifying lens, would struggle to replicate it. The tiny carnelian bead, crafted over 4,500 years ago, is pierced by a hole less than a millimeter in diameter, a feat of precision that seems to defy its ancient origins. This bead is not an anomaly, but a signature of a civilization whose true genius lay in the quiet mastery of material, in an unsung ingenuity that built a world not with monuments to power, but with objects of astonishing skill. The people of the Indus Valley were not just city planners and traders, they were consummate craftspeople, pushing the technological boundaries of their age in fields we still value today. Their metallurgy was sophisticated and systematic. They did not simply use copper, they created consistent alloys, blending it with tin or arsenic to produce a stronger, more workable bronze, which was then cast into tools, vessels, and ornaments using the lost wax technique. This method, where a wax model is encased in clay and then melted out to leave a mold for molten metal, allowed for incredible detail. The proof stands in the famous dancing girl statue from Mohenjo-daro. Just over 10 centimeters tall, this bronze figure of a young woman, one hand defiantly on her hip, captures a moment of poised motion with a naturalism rare in the ancient world. She is not a goddess or a queen, but an individual, her confident posture and array of bangles speaking to an artistic sensibility that valued observation of the human form. In pottery, they harnessed the fast potter's wheel, enabling mass production of the elegant black on-red vessels found across the civilization, each fired in kilns that reached consistent high temperatures. But perhaps one of their most transformative inventions was almost invisible: cloth. They were among the planet's first people to cultivate cotton, spin its fiber into thread, and weave it into textiles, creating a comfortable, versatile fabric that became a cornerstone of their trade and daily comfort. This level of craftsmanship was not haphazard. Excavations reveal evidence of specialized workshops clustered in particular city districts. In one area, you might find debris from bead making, with unfinished carnelian and steatite blanks, tiny copper drills, and grinding stones. In another, the remnants of metalworking with crucibles, furnaces, and casting molds. This organization suggests a guild-like system, where knowledge was passed down within families or occupational groups, fostering a deep, generational expertise. A master craftsperson likely oversaw apprentices, ensuring the standardized quality we see in everything from brick sizes to bead shapes. This celebration of skill shifts our perspective from the grand scale of city walls to the intimate scale of the workshop. It makes us wonder about the daily rhythms of these artisans. What was it like to spend a lifetime perfecting the art of drilling a perfect bead, or mixing an ideal clay slip, or casting a bronze figure that would outlive your civilization by millennia? Their legacy is etched not in stone edicts, but in the minute, beautiful evidence of hands at work, creating the material wealth that made their peaceful prosperity possible. The scent of freshly baked flatbread would have drifted from a dozen courtyards as the morning sun warmed the brick streets. A child's terracotta cart, its tiny wheels worn smooth, might have clattered over a threshold, while from below the grates came the steady, quiet gurgle of water flowing toward the main drain. This was the symphony of a normal day in Mohenjo-daro, a civilization experienced not in its grand monuments, but in these intimate human moments. Stepping away from the wide main thoroughfares and into the residential lanes, we move from studying a society to glimpsing the lives that composed it. The archaeological record here is remarkably domestic, built from the accumulated debris of daily existence, allowing us to reconstruct a vivid portrait of how people lived, worked, and found meaning within their orderly world. The layout of the city itself offers the first clues to social structure. While the streets followed a rigid grid, the homes within the blocks showed clear, but not extreme, variation. Some houses were modest, single-story dwellings with a few rooms opening onto a small courtyard. Others were expansive two-story complexes with dozens of rooms, private wells, and elaborate bathing platforms. This suggests a society with distinct social tiers, likely based on wealth, occupation, or lineage. Yet the absence of truly palatial estates hints that inequality was perhaps more muted here than in other ancient civilizations. Even burial practices reflect this nuanced hierarchy. While most interments were simple, some individuals were laid to rest with a few personal ornaments like shell bangles or pottery vessels, slight differences that speak to status without shouting of opulent wealth. The evidence for daily roles, particularly gender, is more subtle and open to interpretation. The famous bronze dancing girl figurine and numerous terracotta female figures, often called mother goddesses, have led to much speculation. Some scholars suggest these point to a cultural reverence for feminine power, perhaps infertility or ritual contexts, while others caution they could represent popular folk art or toys. The grave goods show little stark division between men and women, implying their social identities may have been shaped more by family, craft, or clan than by gender alone. So what filled the hours within these brick walls? The day revolved around sustenance, craft, and community. The diet was robust and varied, built on a foundation of wheat and barley, supplemented by peas, dates, and sesame. Meat from cattle, sheep, goats, and water buffalo was consumed, and fishing provided protein from the nearby river. This bounty was prepared in courtyard kitchens, where clay ovens and grinding stones have been found. For clothing, the Indus people were pioneers, clad in comfortable cotton they had learned to weave, and likely wool for cooler periods, with ornaments of shell, copper, and carnelian beads adding color and status. Leisure moments existed too. Cubical dice made of terracotta and stone hint at games of chance, while whistles shaped like birds and pull-along toys speak of children at play. Health was managed with remarkable sophistication. Skeletons show evidence of healed fractures, suggesting a community that cared for its injured, and one extraordinary find from Mayagar, an earlier site in the region, reveals a tooth that had been drilled, likely to relieve an abscess, marking one of the earliest known examples of dentistry in the world. The typical house was a self-contained universe designed for comfort and hygiene. You would enter from a side lane into a doorway that deliberately obscured the interior courtyard from public view, ensuring privacy. This central courtyard was the heart of the home, open to the sky, where cooking, weaving, and family gatherings took place. Stairs led to a second floor or a rooftop terrace for sleeping in the cool night air. Off the courtyard was a distinctive bathing area with a watertight floor that sloped to a drain, proving the commitment to cleanliness was a personal, household value as much as a civic one. And in a small recess near the street, you would find the home's connection to the city's genius, a chute where wastewater from the bath could be poured, disappearing into the covered drain running beneath the lane. This intimate, tangible portrait of daily life, of bread and games and healing, makes the civilization feel startlingly close, yet it also circles us back to the profound silence at its core. We can see where they bathed, but not what they prayed. We can see the toys of their children, but not the stories they told them at night. The full texture of their beliefs, the dreams that filled those quiet courtyards after the lamps were dimmed, remains the final, elusive frontier. The serene, bearded face of the so-called priest-king stares across millennia, his eyes half closed, his lips holding a secret. Found in a broken state in Mohenjo-daro, this single stone bust and the iconic seal of the meditating figure surrounded by animals have become the defining, yet enigmatic, icons of the Indus Valley's spiritual imagination. They invite us into a sacred landscape, but without a single deciphered prayer or hymn to guide us. We are left to interpret a religion written entirely in objects, architecture, and art. Reconstructing their beliefs is an exercise in careful archaeology and informed speculation, piecing together a cosmology from the silent testimony of what they built and what they buried. The challenge is immense, for we are trying to hear an echo in a sealed room, using only the shape of the walls to guess the sound that once filled it. From this material silence, scholars have proposed several compelling, sometimes overlapping, theories about the spiritual world that underpinned this orderly civilization. One of the most persistent ideas connects the Indus Valley to the deep roots of later Indian traditions. The seal depicting a figure in a clear yogic posture, surrounded by powerful animals, strikes many as a profound prototype. The renowned archaeologist John Marshall first suggested this figure could be an early representation of a divine being later known as Shiva, specifically in his form as Pashupati, the lord of animals. This does not necessarily mean the Harappans worshipped the Shiva of classical Hinduism, but it powerfully suggests that core concepts of ascetic discipline, meditation, and a harmony between humanity and the natural world were already being visualized and revered. Alongside this possible early Shaivism, another thread appears in the countless terracotta figurines of women, often with elaborate headdresses and exaggerated hips. Popularly called Mother Goddess figurines, these small statues have sparked theories of a widespread fertility cult or veneration of a feminine divine principle. While some experts caution they could be toys, votive offerings, or representations of actual women, their sheer number and find sites near household areas hint at a personal, domestic spirituality centered on concepts of creation, protection, and the continuity of life. The spiritual world also seems deeply entwined with the natural one. The recurring motif of the pipal leaf, the sacred fig tree of later Indian lore, and the profound reverence for certain animals like the humped bull and the unicorn suggest a belief system where the divine was immanent in the living world. These animals on the seals were likely more than decorative. They may have been totems, clan symbols, or even divine vehicles, their images invoking protection and authority. This reverence extended to elemental forces, most profoundly to water. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro stands as the most eloquent architectural argument for a ritual-centered society. This large, meticulously engineered pool, waterproofed with bitumen and equipped with private changing rooms, was almost certainly not for everyday bathing. Its design suggests a space for ceremonial purification, a ritual act of washing away spiritual impurity that would resonate for ages in the subcontinent's traditions. The act of immersion in its waters likely reinforced social and cosmic order, a collective ritual that bound the community to a shared understanding of cleanliness, both physical and spiritual. Fire, too, played a sacred role. At the site of Kalibangan, archaeologists uncovered a series of raised brick platforms associated with ash and sacrificial remains, identified as fire altars. Similar structures have been found in domestic contexts in other cities. This points to a practice of fire rituals, perhaps offerings to deities or rites for the household. Another strand of continuity with later Vedic and Hindu practices where fire is the sacred conduit between the human and the divine. When life ended, the Harappans generally practiced a remarkable simplicity. Burial practices were varied but typically modest, reflecting a pragmatic and perhaps diverse view of the afterlife. The most common method was full body burial in a simple pit or brick-lined grave, with the body often laid in a north-south orientation. Grave goods were usually sparse, a few pots for food and water, sometimes personal ornaments like shell bangles or necklaces of steatite beads. This suggests a belief in some form of continued journey, where the deceased might need sustenance and familiar items, but not the extravagant wealth for the afterlife seen in contemporaneous Egypt or Mesopotamia. At Harappa, evidence of a different practice emerged, with some remains found in large ceramic jars, indicating possible exposure or excarnation before the bones were collected for burial. This diversity in practice itself is a clue, hinting that beliefs about death and what lay beyond may have varied between communities, families, or social groups, unified more by a general respect for the departed than by a rigid, state-imposed doctrine. This spiritual exploration, built from baths, figurines, and quiet graves, brings us to the heart of the ultimate mystery, their worldview. It paints a picture of a society whose sacred values may have emphasized harmony with nature, ritual purity, cyclical renewal, and a form of inner discipline. Their symbols speak of a world imbued with meaning, where every tree, animal, and flowing stream could be a manifestation of the sacred, and where communal rituals like the Great Bath reinforced the social fabric. This potential spiritual framework, one that valued order, cleanliness, and cosmic balance, could have been the invisible mortar that held the bricks of their civilization together, offering a profound reason for their social cohesion that went far beyond mere economics or covert control. It suggests that their peace may have been, at least in part, a philosophical and religious achievement, a conscious ordering of society to reflect a deeper ordering of the universe. Around 2,000 years before the Common Era, the world witnessed a remarkable convergence of human genius along three great river systems. While the pharaohs of Egypt raised pyramids toward the sun and Mesopotamian kings inscribed their laws on stone pillars, the master planners of the Indus Valley were laying out cities in a perfect geometric grid. These three civilizations flourished in parallel, largely unaware of each other, yet each was building a distinct model for what a complex society could be. Placing the Indus Valley beside its more famous contemporaries is not just an academic exercise, it is a revelation that forces us to question the very blueprint of early civilization. Historians like John Key note that the traditional markers of power we associate with Egypt and Mesopotamia are conspicuously absent in the Indus world. Where the Nile and the Tigris-Euphrates valleys celebrated the individual ruler with colossal statues and inscribed autobiographies glorifying conquest, the Indus Valley offers a profound silence. No grand palaces loom over its cities, no towering temples dedicated to a sun god or a storm deity dominate the skyline. Instead, authority seems to have been invested in the civic fabric itself, in wide streets, public baths, and granaries that serve the collective. This is a civilization that chose to memorialize its sophistication not in the image of a king, but in the precision of a brick and the flow of a covered drain. The scarcity of weapons, so stark when contrasted with the arsenals and battle scenes depicted in Mesopotamian art, suggests a societal priority that fundamentally redefined security. For world historians, this divergence is profoundly important. It actively challenges what some call Eurocentric, or more accurately, Mesopotamia-centric, models of state formation that assume monarchy, militarism, and monumental architecture are inevitable prerequisites for complex society. The Indus Valley stands as a powerful counterexample, a testament to an alternative pathway where collective well-being and urban efficiency might have been the highest ideals. Yet, these three separate worlds were not entirely disconnected. They were linked by the thin, strong threads of Bronze Age trade, a kind of ancient globalization. Indus carnelian beads and distinctive seals have been found in the ruins of in Mesopotamia, while Mesopotamian texts speak of a distant land called Meluha, a source of exotic woods and precious stones. This exchange created a web of mutual awareness, making the contrasts in their domestic choices even more striking. We can see this clearly in a side-by-side comparison. Look at their writing. Egyptian hieroglyphs and Mesopotamian cuneiform were complex systems used for royal propaganda, literature, and law. The Indus script, by contrast, appears primarily on small seals and tablets, likely for commerce and administration. Examine their city plans. Mesopotamian cities grew organically around temple complexes, resulting in a maze of narrow lanes, while Indus cities were pre-planned on a strict grid, emphasizing order and public hygiene. Consider their art, where Egyptian and Mesopotamian artists focused on gods, kings, and conquests. Indus artisans depicted animals, meditative figures, and geometric patterns, focusing on the natural world and perhaps spiritual harmony rather than political power. This broader perspective does not diminish the Indus Valley, it elevates its mystery. It was not a failed imitation of Egypt or Mesopotamia. It was a fully realized, brilliant experiment in a different kind of social contract. Its very distinctiveness makes its ultimate fate, its quiet unraveling, not just the end of a city, but the closing of a unique chapter in the human story. As we turn to those final centuries, we must view its decline through this lens, not as a collapse into darkness, but as the gradual fading of a singular vision. History is rarely a simple story of winners and losers. For over a century, the dominant explanation for the end of the Indus Valley civilization was a dramatic, violent one, a narrative known as the Aryan invasion theory. It was a compelling tale that seemed to fit the evidence of its time, suggesting that waves of nomadic, horse-riding warriors from the north, speaking an early form of Sanskrit, swept down into the subcontinent, conquering the peaceful cities and imposing their own culture and gods. This theory, heavily influenced by colonial-era ideas and later by nationalist politics, provided a clean break in the historical record, a clear cause for the civilization's disappearance. Yet, as archaeology advanced, this clean story began to fracture. The more researchers looked, the less evidence they found for a sudden, catastrophic invasion. There were no widespread layers of ash from sacked cities at Harappa or Mohenjo-daro, no mass graves filled with the victims of war, no sudden archaeological horizon where Indus artifacts were replaced by an entirely new material culture. The decline, as we have seen, was a slow, complex process of de-urbanization, not a single military event. This lack of evidence led to a profound scholarly revision. Today, most archaeologists and historians view the old invasion model as largely outdated. The current consensus paints a far more nuanced picture of cultural transition. It suggests that during the centuries of the Indus civilization's gradual decline, starting around 2,000 years before the Common Era, groups of pastoral peoples speaking Indo-European languages may have migrated slowly into the region from the northwest. These were not a unified army, but likely loose confederations of clans with their herds. Their interaction with the remaining, still sophisticated Harappan communities was probably a long process of contact, trade, and eventual settlement, not a swift conquest. Think of it not as a replacement, but as a long, slow interweaving. As the established urban networks weakened, these new groups, with their mobile pastoral lifestyle, were better adapted to the increasingly arid conditions and the fragmented landscape. Over generations, a synthesis occurred where elements of the old Indus culture, like certain craft techniques and spiritual symbols, blended with the new cultural packages brought by the migrants. This fusion eventually gave rise to the new social and cultural patterns of the subsequent Vedic age. Two key pieces of evidence are central to this debate. First is the linguistic layer. The languages of the migrants, early forms of Sanskrit, eventually became dominant in North India, but the process was likely one of adoption and adaptation over centuries, not immediate imposition. Some scholars argue that features of the older, possibly Dravidian languages spoken by the Indus people may have influenced the developing Sanskrit, hinting at a deep cultural exchange. Second is the introduction of the horse and the spoked wheel chariot. These are iconic elements of the Vedic culture that followed, but they are conspicuously absent from the mature Indus period. Their appearance in the archaeological record of the region after 1900 BCE marks a significant new technological and cultural influence, one associated with the migrating groups. This revised view transforms the narrative from one of violent erasure to one of complex transition. It asks us to see the end of the Indus civilization not as a defeat, but as a metamorphosis where its legacy was absorbed into the genetic and cultural tapestry of South Asia. This prepares us for the most poignant question of all. If so much was transformed and carried forward, what elements of that unique, orderly world were truly, irrevocably lost when the last lamps went out in Mohenjo-daro? The silence that fell was not merely an absence of people, but the fading of an entire way of seeing the world. What truly vanished with the Indus Valley civilization was not its population, but its intricate cultural package, a sophisticated set of interconnected ideas and practices that could only flourish under specific conditions of stability and abundance. Picture the elegant script, etched on seals for centuries, falling into disuse as the long-distance trade networks it facilitated slowly withered. Without merchants needing to send tamper-proof manifests from Lothal to Harappa, the specialized knowledge of those symbols, likely held within guilds or families, was no longer a vital skill. Within a few generations, the ability to read or write those graceful lines was simply forgotten, leaving behind only beautiful, mute artifacts. The same fate met the system of standardized weights, those precise chert cubes that had once guaranteed fair trade across 1 million square kilometers. In a world now focused on local barter and subsistence, the need for a universal measure faded, and the knowledge of their exact ratios dissolved into the practicalities of village life. The most visible loss was the grand vision of urban planning itself. The concept of the pre-planned city, with its wide, gridded streets and sophisticated civic drainage, required a level of centralized coordination and communal labor that fragmented societies could no longer sustain. People no longer built elevated platforms to guard against floods or laid miles of covered brick drains. They moved to smaller, simpler settlements along reliable water sources, where survival was a more immediate concern than civic grandeur. This unraveling was not a failure of imagination, but a pragmatic adaptation to a changing world. The complex traits of the Indus peak, its script, its weights, its cities, were what archaeologists call costly in terms of social organization. They required a substantial agricultural surplus to support non-farming specialists like scribes, weight makers, and civic engineers. They needed a stable climate to ensure that surplus, and a peaceful, integrated economy to make the system worthwhile. As the monsoons weakened, rivers shifted, and trade routes fractured, that surplus and stability evaporated. The social energy needed to maintain the great cultural package was simply too high a cost for communities now facing environmental stress and economic contraction. Societies, when pressed, often choose a path of simplification, shedding complex layers to ensure basic survival. This is not a descent into primitivism, but a strategic retreat to a more resilient, localized way of life. The archaeological record shows this shift clearly, from the monumental scale of Mohenjo-daro to the modest remains of countless small villages. The focus turned inward, from exporting luxury carnelian beads to ensuring the local harvest, from managing a city-wide sewer to digging a single-family well. These adaptive communities left far fewer and less spectacular traces for us to find, their stories written in simpler pottery and the bones of their livestock, rather than in seals and citadels. This poignant transition from complexity to a quieter, more diffuse existence is a recurring theme in human history. It asks us to measure loss not just by what is abandoned, but by what is preserved in new forms. The cultural package of the cities dissolved, but the people, their descendants, carried forward the seeds of knowledge, ritual, and craft into the next chapter of the subcontinent's story. Our understanding of that journey from grand city to resilient village is not static. It is being rewritten today by the quiet, persistent work of the trowel and the satellite, in a modern quest to find the missing pieces of this ancient puzzle. The mounds themselves are beginning to speak. For over a century, understanding the Indus Valley meant the slow, careful work of the trowel and brush, a process that, while invaluable, could only ever reveal fragments. Today, a revolution is unfolding not with shovels, but with scanners and sequencers. A new generation of archaeologists is employing a suite of non-invasive technologies that act like X-ray vision for history, peering into unexcavated mounds and analyzing the molecular secrets locked within bones and teeth. This modern toolkit is transforming the Indus Valley from a collection of silent ruins into a dynamic landscape pulsing with hidden data, offering our best chance yet to hear its whispers. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, sends pulses of energy into the earth, mapping the density of buried structures. When deployed over the vast, unexplored mounds at sites like Rakhiahi in India, it can reveal the ghostly outlines of entire neighborhoods, streets, and buildings still hidden beneath the soil, creating a detailed map of a buried city without ever breaking ground. Complementing this is LiDAR, light detection and ranging, which uses lasers from aircraft to strip away forest canopy or create ultra-precise topographic maps, revealing ancient water channels, field systems, and settlement patterns invisible from the ground. These tools allow researchers to see the civilization in its full environmental context, understanding how cities related to their rivers and farmlands on a regional scale. But the science goes far deeper than mapping. Isotopic analysis examines the chemical signatures preserved in human bones and teeth. The saying, "You are what you eat," becomes a scientific principle here. By analyzing stable isotopes of elements like strontium and oxygen, scientists can determine where an individual grew up and what their diet consisted of. Did this person buried in Mohenjo-daro spend their childhood near the coast, or were they from an inland farming village? Did their diet shift over their lifetime, perhaps indicating migration or a change in social status? This turns a single skeleton into a biography written in chemistry. Even traces of illness are now detectable. Analysis of dental calculus, the hardened plaque on ancient teeth, has revealed evidence of malaria at Harappa, providing a tangible clue to the health challenges people may have faced. Perhaps most anticipated are the advances in ancient DNA, or DNA studies. While the hot, humid climate of South Asia is notoriously harsh on preserving genetic material, successful extractions are now being reported. This science holds the potential to directly address one of the most heated debates, the question of population continuity. By analyzing genetic material from Indus Valley burials and comparing it to both earlier and later populations in the region, researchers may finally clarify the scale and nature of any migrations, moving the discussion about the civilization's end beyond theory and into the realm of genetic evidence. Furthermore, material science is tracing the civilization's economic reach with new precision. Through chemical fingerprinting, experts can determine that a lapis lazuli bead found in Harappa originated from a specific mine group in Afghanistan, or that copper artifacts came from ore sources in Oman or Rajasthan. This reconstructs ancient trade routes with astonishing accuracy, turning a beautiful object into a data point in a vast network. These are not just new tools, they represent a fundamental shift in perspective. As archaeologist Vasant Shind notes, we are no longer just excavating sites, we are interrogating an entire ecosystem. Each scan, each isotopic ratio, each fragment of genetic code is a pixel in a gradually sharpening portrait. This multi-pronged scientific assault on the past builds a palpable sense of anticipation. With every season, the probability increases that one of these technologies will provide the crucial, missing context, the Rosetta Stone-like clue that could finally give meaning to those elegant, undeciphered symbols. Who does a 4,000-year-old civilization truly belong to? The Indus Valley does not rest neatly within a single modern nation. Its ruins scattered across what is now eastern Pakistan and northwestern India. This geographical reality places its legacy at the heart of a profound and delicate modern conversation, one that stretches far beyond academic curiosity into the realms of cultural heritage, national identity, and ethical stewardship. The silent cities have become powerful symbols, and like all potent symbols, they can be claimed and interpreted in ways that serve the present as much as they explain the past. In both India and Pakistan, elements of the Indus narrative have sometimes been woven into nationalist stories, used to anchor modern state identities in a deep, prestigious antiquity. This is not inherently negative. It speaks to a powerful human need for roots, but it risks simplifying a complex, shared heritage into a tool for division, turning a civilization that likely knew no such borders into a trophy for one side or the other. The work of archaeology itself is not immune to these pressures. Excavations and interpretations can be influenced by contemporary political agendas, whether consciously or not. This makes the perspective of heritage professionals, those dedicated to preservation over politics, absolutely vital. Their fight is often a quiet, urgent one against more immediate threats than historical debate. At Mohenjo-daro, the very bricks that have survived for millennia are now under siege by a rising water table, which draws salts up from the ground. As the water evaporates under the fierce sun, crystalline salt forms within the ancient brickwork, slowly and relentlessly forcing it to crumble from the inside out. It is a preservation crisis of monumental scale, a race against chemistry and time. Elsewhere, the threats are human. Looters seeking artifacts for the illegal antiquities market dig destructive pits into unprotected mounds, destroying archaeological context forever. Perhaps the most pervasive challenge is urban encroachment, as modern towns and farms expand over the very land that holds the secrets of the past. Balancing these competing needs is an immense ethical task. It requires a dialogue between scientific teams, government bodies, and the local communities who live alongside these sites. The past cannot be preserved in a vacuum. A farmer whose field covers a Harappan layer or a family needing to build a home has immediate, legitimate concerns. Ethical archaeology increasingly recognizes that the story of a place must include the people who live there now, finding ways for preservation to offer local benefit, whether through education, tourism, or respectful collaboration. This modern layer adds a crucial dimension to the historical mystery. It reminds us that the past is never truly dead. It is a living, contested space that we are responsible for curating. The choices we make today about funding digs, protecting sites from salinity, or interpreting artifacts directly shape what future generations will be able to learn and feel about this extraordinary civilization. Our stewardship becomes part of its ongoing story. A great civilization should not be this quiet. The Indus Valley stands in history like a stone sphinx, its body the magnificent, ordered ruins of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, its face the serene, inscrutable gaze of the priest-king bust. But its riddle is different. It asks not about gods or monsters, but about ourselves. How did a society of millions maintain cohesion for centuries without the clear architecture of war? What does it mean for human communication to be so elegantly rendered, yet remain utterly silent to us? This combination of dazzling achievement and profound silence is the source of its enduring power. We are captivated because we see a reflection of our own potential, a reflection that is brilliant yet blurred, familiar yet alien. It represents the ultimate road not taken, a fully realized proof that complex civilization could be built on a foundation of civic order and economic integration, rather than the cult of the warrior king. This alternative blueprint whispers a tantalizing possibility that our ancient past might hold models for cooperation we have since forgotten or overlooked. This is why the Indus Valley escapes the dusty shelves of academia to fire the imagination of popular culture. It is the perfect setting for speculative fiction and alternative histories because its blank spaces are so inviting. Writers and filmmakers can ask, what if the script was decoded to reveal a lost philosophy of peace? What if the civilization never declined, but evolved into a hidden, advanced society? These stories thrive because the reality provides such a compelling scaffold, a world that feels both incredibly sophisticated and mysteriously empty, waiting for a narrative to fill it. On a more personal level, the civilization plays a profound role in modern identity, particularly across South Asia. For Pakistan and India, it is a deep, pre-literate root, a shared heritage that predates later divisions. It offers a point of common origin and immense pride, a testament to indigenous ingenuity in urban planning, craftsmanship, and social organization. It is a reminder that the subcontinent was home to one of humanity's foundational experiments, a fact that resonates deeply in the cultural consciousness. For historians, the Indus challenge is even more fundamental. It is a persistent, quiet rebuke to traditional narratives. History, for so long, was written by the victors and carved with their swords. It centered on kings, dynasties, and battles. The Indus Valley refuses to comply. It forces scholars to think beyond thrones and armies, to consider power that flowed through granaries and standardized weights, authority expressed in sewer lines and ritual baths. It expands the very definition of what makes a civilization successful, asking us to value longevity, public health, and economic stability as highly as territorial conquest. This is its ultimate captivation. It is not a puzzle we solve to close a book, but a mirror we look into to question our assumptions. The Sphinx riddle is not about a single answer, but about the journey of asking, about recognizing that the paths humanity has walked were not the only ones possible. In its silent streets, we hear a call to imagine differently, to consider that the most enduring monuments might not be pyramids or palaces, but the simple, revolutionary idea of a city built for the well-being of all who lived there. That unanswered call, that glimpse of a road not taken, is what lingers long after the tour of the ruins is over. The streets of Mohenjo-daro are now quiet, their perfect grid a ghostly blueprint for a society that mastered order without leaving us the key to its thoughts. Our journey through the Indus Valley civilization ends not with a solved mystery, but with a deepened appreciation for one of history's most elegant and perplexing puzzles. We have walked alongside its master planners, marveled at its ingenious drains, and held its beautiful, silent seals in our mind's eye. We have confronted the haunting absence where weapons and warrior kings should be, forcing us to reimagine the very foundations of power. This civilization story is a testament to a different kind of genius, one measured in standardized bricks, equitable weights, and a profound commitment to communal well-being that thrived for nearly 1,000 years. Its sophistication is undeniable, etched into every corner of its planned cities, yet its voice remains just out of reach, locked within those short, elegant inscriptions. That very frustration is a gift. It is the unresolved question that keeps the past alive, pushing archaeologists to employ satellites and DNA sequencers in a modern quest to finally hear its whispers. The Indus Valley was not a failure that vanished. It was a magnificent, sustained experiment in human organization, a proof that complexity can be built on a foundation of trade, ritual, and civic care rather than conquest. Its gradual transformation reminds us that civilizations are not monuments, but conversations between people and their environment, conversations that can change tone and language over time without losing their essential humanity. In the end, the greatest legacy of this weaponless empire may be the questions it leaves us. In a world often narrated by the victors of battles, the Indus Valley offers a compelling counter-narrative, a silent challenge to our assumptions about how societies cohere and what we choose to memorialize. Its mystery is not a void to be filled, but a space for wonder, a reminder that our shared past is far richer and more varied than any single story can contain. That wonder is what drives discovery, connecting us across millennia in a shared pursuit of understanding. If this exploration into a lost world has sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the untold stories of ancient history. And we would love to hear your thoughts. What do you believe is the secret held within the Indus script? Share your theories in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation.